Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. Well, welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jamison Cable, and we got some more great Kentucky history coming your way. We're pleased to welcome Connie Taylor, the author of Voices That Echo from the Past, A Black History of Grant County. This well-researched book combines genealogy and history to all the story of the black population in Grant County, Kentucky, covering the period from slavery through emancipation, segregation, and the civil rights era. As the first book to cover the entire black history of the county, it is a valuable read for those interested in black history or Grant County history. Ms. Taylor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first, I always like to get our guests to kind of talk about their Kentucky connection, give us a little bit of history about yourself, and so forth. So, what is your Kentucky connection?
Okay, I was born in Grant County, Kentucky, and lived here till I graduated from high school, then went to college at Eastern, and basically didn't live in the county. I went to West Virginia for 7 years, Cincinnati, and then the last part of my career I spent on the Navajo Indian Reservation in Chinle, Arizona, working for the Indian Health Service, which is part of Health and Human Services Department. And so this is my home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you said just previously, I'm here in Lincoln County. You have some Lincoln County connections as well?
Yes, my dad was born in Lincoln County, Waynesburg,
Oh,
Lincoln
yeah.
County.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about
So we've been down there a few times.
yeah, I'm about probably 5-6 miles from Waynesburg. In
Oh, okay.
Crab Orchard is where I'm at. So,
Well, I think
uh,
he lived in Crab Orchard sometime too.
okay. um, good. Well, so what got you started on this book? What made you or got you interested or so forth? What got you interested in getting this book together?
Well, during the last part of my career, while I was at Chinle, I got interested in genealogy, and I was working on a genealogy of a black friend of mine from Cincinnati. And I just got to thinking I didn't remember seeing any blacks in Grant County. And so that got me curious, and I got to research it and found out we had several blacks in Grant County. And the more I researched, the more I thought there was a story there to tell. And so I decided I wanted to be the one to tell it.
So, as far as the book goes, it covers a lot of information. Um, any kind of stories that really, I guess, jump out at you, or we can just start at the beginning if you want. How does the history go? How does it start in Grant County for the African Americans and so forth? How does it begin?
Okay, it starts, they were brought to Kentucky from Virginia. They came with their masters as they gave away land for people who fought for Virginia in the Revolutionary War, and they didn't have money to pay them, so they gave them land in Kentucky. That's how Lincoln County got here too. That was also given to people who fought in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so the slaves came with them, and they helped them build their houses and set up their farms. And the more people that moved in, the more slaves we had.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for those people who may not know, Grant County, I would say, is northern Kentucky ish.
Yes, it's northern Kentucky. It's halfway between Lexington and Cincinnati, Ohio.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's see, you got Dry Ridge. What's some other towns there?
Williamstown,
Williamstown, yeah.
where the infamous Ark is, the Ark Encounter.
Yeah. Now is Crenton in?
Crittenden's in Grant
Yeah.
County.
Okay. Uh,
Hmm.
and it leads me a little bit, but Grant County was I can't think of when the year it was formed right off. Um, but like you said, yeah,
1821
1821.
or
Yep.
around that time.
Mhm. And like you said, a lot of the people who would be coming over here were given the grants and so forth, and therefore they brought their um, families and enslaved as well. Um, how many? I mean, if you could ballpark as for far as the early population, how many enslaved people would you say there were compared to uh, the
In
white
the
population?
early period, there was probably less than 100, but by 1860, we had 794.
Okay, so
Some of
pretty.
them were freedmen by then, but not a lot
Mhm.
of them, about 12, I think it was.
And now, so during the Civil War, I assume that was probably a very controversial time. And what sort of encounters or things happened during that time?
Well, one thing, we had several blacks, about 25, who fought in the Civil War
Hmm.
from Grant County. Some of them fought with their owner's blessings, and then the Union paid the owner $300 for their slave to fight in the war. Some of them had evidently already run off or got free before that because they were in neighboring. They were in Ohio. There was a couple in Indiana.
Hmm.
About six of them died during the war from diseases, communicable diseases, because most of them had not been off the farm before, where they were here in Gray County, and so they had not been in contact with all these different pathogens that you can get. And so about six of them died and didn't make it back.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
they had a very active role in the Civil War.
Hmm. Um, and I know like many counties in Kentucky, the split between North and South was probably pretty strong. For Grant County, how did that go?
Um, Grant County, they were split because there were brothers that would fight for one side. Brother would fight for the Union, one would fight for the Confederacy. Both the Confederacy and the Union armies went through here. In fact, the Cason family, their slaves, when they heard the army was coming, and I forget which one it was. Anyway, they took all the guns and put them down the well so that the soldiers couldn't find them. They'd take the horses, and at the Henderson farm, they took the horses to the back of the farm so they couldn't find them. So the slaves were actively helping the family preserve what they had.
Hmm. Hmm.
Kentucky was known as a sort of a kinder, gentler state for slavery, although there were still plenty of whippings and things that went on here um, that can't be ignored. And I don't think slavery can ever be too gentle, because they never knew when their family was going to be split up. They never knew when they could die getting whipped.
Hmm.
So even though if they weren't whipped regularly, still just the fact that they were not free to go where they wanted to go, and not free to, they stayed married until they parted, not necessarily until death do us part.
Hmm.
So it was an easier slavery because they didn't work in the fields as long as they did down in this more southern states, because we had smaller farms here. But it was still not a nice
Situation.
situation to
Yeah.
be in.
Yeah. Now, after the Civil War, what do we kind of see change, or is there much change as far as?
Um, a lot of the slaves, I believe, when they free, I can't prove this, but I think they stayed on with their masters as tenant farmers, or they ended up working as tenant farmers for somebody. And they did start some schools. I just found out the other day that we had a freedmen's school here in Crittenden, in about 1866 that they'd started for the kids. At first, according to the records, it wasn't very popular to educate the black children, but by about 1880, that attitude had changed, and they were starting to feel that they should be educated.
Hmm. And isn't that always the way it goes when you are writing a book? As soon as it's
Of course, I knew I was going to find something else. I knew it.
Uh, yeah. Um, and I'm not as familiar with say like the Jim Crow laws and so forth after all, from the after the Civil War to the 1920s and so forth. Any of those things kind of established in Grant County that kind of hindered the progress of those people.
We did have Jim Crow laws here. I never remember seeing any of the whites only signs or coloreds only. Some of the kids I went to school with remember it. Of course, we're not kids anymore, but it's been a while. But I don't. I didn't go to Williamstown that much either. I grew up out in the country, and but there were, different bathrooms for coloreds and whites. The halfway house, the coloreds had to eat in the basement and go around back and go to the basement. There was a bar on the edge of the Grant County, I think it'd be Kenton County line, and they had to go to the back of it. They had a room back there that they would let them use, but and they usually only got menial type jobs, housekeeping, cleaning up. One of my favorite stories that I found was of Addie Williams, who lived in Williamstown right behind the courthouse. And Addie was a rotund lady, amply built,
Hmm.
and she couldn't get a housekeeping job because of her size. And so she ended up making bootleg beer right behind
Okay.
the courthouse. Now, the rumor is that she supplied the courthouse with their beer. I don't know that to be true
Hmm.
because nobody's around that was there to ask. But she never got arrested. But one time I found that she was arrested, and she got in a fight with a man named B. Warner. And one of them had a razor and one of them had a knife, and they went at it because B didn't want to pay for his beer, and she took offense at that.
Uh-huh.
And so they got in a fight and they called the police and they arrested both of them. But she didn't have to spend the night in jail because she couldn't fit in any of their cots. So they had to let her go.
Oh.
But that's the only time I found that she was arrested, even though everybody knew she had a business right behind the courthouse. And I call her my first female black entrepreneur in Grant County.
What was the year on that, or like around the time?
1920s probably. And
Yeah.
she had children, so she had to come up with some way to support them. So that's what she did.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, so moving on into like you got segregation, which is kind of what we were talking about. With civil rights and stuff, how was that for in Grant County? Anything major?
I could find no reference to where anything happened in the civil rights era. We did have a lady that was sort of kicked off of a Greyhound bus before Rosa Parks. Miss Della Jones was going to summer school at Kentucky State College in Frankfort. And so she had gotten on the bus at Frankfort and the bus wasn't full. So she sat about halfway back. And the bus driver asked her to get up and move to the back. And she said no. And so when they stopped in Georgetown for a break, everybody got off and she got off with them. And when she went to get back on the bus, he wouldn't let her on the bus. He had taken her suitcase off, set it on the sidewalk, and did not allow her to get back on the bus.
Oh wow.
So
Mm.
we had our own Rosa Parks here early.
Yeah.
Um, and Miss Della also bought a house. Williamstown had a law that said black people could only buy property in certain parts of town, which of course wasn't the better part of town. And Miss Della had always lived in this house, and the owner had died, and so it was in estate. and it was going up for sale at the county courthouse. And so she told me that she prayed and prayed all night that she could buy her house. And she got dressed the next morning, and she was a short little lady, light complected. And she walked up to the courthouse and said she was scared to death because it was just her and all these white men. And so the county clerk wasn't there that day. Her son, who was the assistant county clerk, was taken over. And so she made her bid on the house, and he closed the bids, and she got to buy her house, even though she had lived there all of her life, and that
Mhm.
was not one of the streets that blacks could buy on.
Mhm.
But and she was just so thankful that she got to stay in her house. Miss
Wow.
Della lived to be 106. I had the
Whoa.
privilege of meeting her, and her mind was just as sharp as a tack. She was an
Mhm.
educator. She taught school in Owen County.
Uh-huh.
And her memory, I could mention a name and she could tell me where they lived, what they did, who their relatives were, who they married. It was
Wow.
just amazing. But I only knew her for the last 6 months of her life. I wish I'd
Mhm.
known her when I really knew what to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, gosh, 106 of shoo. When was she born? 19 early 1900s? I mean,
Early
it had to
1900s,
be.
because she died in 2009.
Okay. Wow. Wow. That would be a great person to pick their mind of
Oh,
just,
definitely.
history and so forth, and she probably, I mean, firsthand account through
Definitely.
centuries worth of.
She could remember the Ku Klux Klan being active here and
Mhm.
burning crosses, and how scared she was when she saw those. And she was just an amazing resource,
Yeah.
amazing. And we, at first, she was a little hesitant to talk to me because uh, during this process I was met with a little hesitation from several people, because they didn't know for sure that I was real and that I was really going to do this. They couldn't quite understand why I would care. But we ended up hitting it off, and had a great time. She was in a nursing home by then, so I would research during the day and then go over there at night and tell her what I'd learned, and she'd tell me what she knew extra about it. And this one day, I went to spent my day entering my information into my computer's program so I could get it organized. You have to do that eventually, and I didn't learn anything new, so I went over to work to talk to her that night, and she said, "Well, what'd you learn today?" And I said, "Well, I didn't learn any." "What do you mean you didn't learn anything? You didn't learn a thing?" And I said, "No, not a thing. I was putting it in my, you didn't learn one thing." And so after that, I knew to at least learn one new thing if I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
to. But I interviewed as many people as I could find that had lived in Grant County, the ones that went to the colored schools here, met some beautiful people, and I just couldn't figure out why I couldn't have known them while I was here in the county. I mean, they had great musical programs at their churches that I never knew about.
Mhm. How many schools total were there?
At one point, there was 5 colored schools in the county, and then they eventually consolidated down to one. And they built a Rosenwald school, and a Rosenwald school was funded by Julius Rosenwald, who was the president of Sears and Roebuck. And don't tell me I'm not going to think of his name. He was president of Tuskegee, uh, famous gentleman, and right now his name is not coming to me. Booker T. Washington.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It just came to me. And so Rosenwald would put up the seed money, but the county had to match it.
Mhm.
And so Grant County applied for one of his grants and got it. And so they had a Rosenwald school, and it was built in about 1823, and it went on until um, 1958, when the schools integrated here.
Mhm.
Um, and it was the only one. The schools, I looked through all old school records I could find, and most of the time the colored schools were as good as the white schools. The teachers got paid the same. Um, their funding was the same. The colored folks did a lot of fundraising to buy extra stuff for their schools. But the one inequality we had in the schools was when they built the Rosenwald School, it was 1 through 8, and so as the rest of the schools went to from one room schools to one classroom for each grade,
Hmm.
the colored school never did that.
Oh,
But when it came time to integrate, the colored people did not want to integrate because they realized that the school was their community center, and
yeah.
that's how their kids learned about their history. And that once that was gone, they would have no, because they knew when they integrated into the white schools that there would not be anything about Black history taught.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I mean that's very true. A lot of schools become that central hub for a community, and
Right.
um, even now when schools close, that is um, an issue. I was going to ask, that was my question, how did integration go, and so forth. But um, any
Well,
other incidences or?
it took several years because integration was supposed to happen in 54. And now Williamstown School integrated really fast because they had one little Black boy, and the county was going to charge him $2,500 for him to go to the colored school. And so they decided they'd integrate. And so he went to Williamstown. So it was no problem. Grant County was a little more problem. Of course, they had a lot more colored children.
Hmm.
And it took 4 more years for them to integrate it. It would come out in the newspaper that Marion Gardner, the superintendent, said they were going to integrate the next year, and then it'd come out that they had a meeting, and then they weren't going to integrate, and so they went back and forth until 58. And I think in 58 they didn't have a choice; they had to integrate.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, was it what how long did it take you to put this all together? I mean, how long of a project has this been?
It took me 15 years.
Oh, okay.
Of course, I had a few joint surgeries in between there, and
Hmm.
took off to rest, and but yeah, and I was always afraid there was going to be something else I was going to miss. That was one reason why I had a hard time bringing it to a close. But I finally got an editor, and she finally said, "Look, you've got to bring this to a close. You've researched enough. You've found everything that's findable. Which
Hmm.
now there's new things on the internet that wasn't there when I was looking and researching. So, like all the Friedman records, there's a lot more of those available now than there was. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a 15-year project.
Wow. Well, that's that's a good bit of dedication. Where can people get the book at?
It's available on Amazon. They can get it there. It's available in Williamstown at the old Arnold House. That's a historic
Hmm.
uh, log home that's open. It's in the Sherman Tavern that's open
Hmm.
most days in the evenings. Uh, or if they see me on the street, they can. I usually have some in my car, so I just don't move them out of there. I just keep them in there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, any other, I guess, we mentioned a few of the ladies that kind of stood out. Any other stories that really kind of stand out?
Well, one that Mrs. Butler told me, which was eye opening to me, but when she was growing up and when she had her children, even um, they were allowed to go in stores and look around and they could buy something, but they couldn't try it on. And if it didn't fit, they couldn't bring it back. And in order to get children's shoes, they had to draw their foot on a piece of cardboard and then take that in to buy the shoes. I had no idea that was going on.
Wow.
Um,
That, I mean, what was the reasoning behind that? Or, I'm trying to think of why they would have that stipulation, but
because they didn't want a white person then to have to try on a dress that a black person
um,
had had on,
okay.
or a pair of shoes, pray tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then during the school period, the white children had busing services, but for the most part, the black children did not. They would actually walk down the railroad tracks from Williamstown to get to Dry Ridge to go to school. And then when the white buses would go by, they would get over as far as they could off the road because they'd be spit on or stuff would be thrown
Uh,
at them.
yeah.
So it wasn't always pleasant for them.
No, that sounds well, terrible. Honestly, um, yeah. Well, again, anything else that you can think of worth noting as far as some of the struggles, maybe some of the more upbeat things.
I was trying to think. We did have one lady I found. This was the last thing I found that went in the book. I'm not going to be able to remember her name, but she was from Dry Ridge. Her parents were slaves for Henry Childers. That's the other thing the book has in it, is where I was able to track the slaves to their slave owners. That's also included in
Yeah,
there because there were quite a few I was able to do that.
slave
Oh,
owners.
Henry Childers, yes. And his daughter was the first to attend college, and she went to one of the black schools, and she ended up becoming the head of the music department at Georgetown University. In fact, she started their music program and developed it, and she was the head of that music program until she retired. And
Wow.
that was the last bit of information I found.
hmm Wow, that's pretty good.
Found
Or
it
pretty good
totally by
little.
accident.
Well, that happens sometimes, and
Yes, it
that
does.
is
Yes, it
completely fine.
does.
um, well, anything else you want to go into,
Well,
or?
the process,
Mhm.
I haven't said anything about it because
Oh yeah.
in researching this, I went through every will book and deed book because slave names are usually found in wills or deeds because they were treated as chattel and
hmm
they were listed right with the cattle and the horses and everything else. But sometimes it would list their name, it would list their age, their color, and so that way you could track them back. But I went through all those books, all the marriage records, birth records, went through every Grant County News and Williamstown Courier since the early or the late 1800s. Plus, then interviewed everybody I could find um, that had
Yeah.
lived here.
hmm
Unfortunately, several of them have died since then, which was a heartbreaker for me because I would love for them to have seen the book, particularly Miss Della.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my next adventure may be writing a book about her.
Well, yeah, it sounds like a pretty well, great. It's a story to tell as well. Um,
Yeah, she was
and
full of them.
and I'm sure she probably has some relatives still around.
Yeah, she's got some great nieces. So
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Well, anything else?
there's so much in
No.
there. It's hard to
Um,
remember all of it specifically, but I have sections on the first of Grant County, who our first school teachers were, first businessmen,
mhm,
um, first people to be on a jury.
mhm.
Um, and it was funny when I was checking that out. If there were all white people on a jury, the newspaper would name them all. But if it's a black person on a jury, they wouldn't.
Wouldn't name any of them,
They would
or
name any. They just say the jury came in or whatever
oh, wow.
until the late 1950s, and then they started naming the black jurors also.
Hmm. No,
But it was just little things like that that you would notice in the newspaper. A lot of times they wouldn't call them by their names; they'd be Aunt Maud or Uncle Henry,
hmm.
but they would not be called by their formal names.
Yeah. Well, I guess little things like that. I guess I probably wouldn't pick up on, but those little, digs, I guess, or insults, or
Yes,
however you want to categorize it. But uh, you wouldn't think about those things, but those things
and
happened a lot.
they would also a lot of times some of the children would be invited to white children's homes to have supper or something,
Mhm.
but they would have to sit at a different table.
Yeah.
And many times they knew that too, and they would not sit at the same table, even if the family offered and told them they were more than welcome. They still
Mhm.
wouldn't do it
Wow. Yeah.
because they knew their place,
hmm hmm
basically.
Um, well, I'd say goes without saying, but a big thank you to putting this all together because shines a light on some of Grant County's history that people may not want to talk about or want to bring to light. But it's very important to tell all the history stories, and I think it's a great thing that you've got together. I wish every county in Kentucky would have a book similar to this.
It shouldn't take
Anything?
them 15 years to do it, though.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that just goes to show you too the amount of passion and work you put into it, and that it's a like many of these history books, it becomes a labor of love and so forth. That people put a lot of their own time into it. So
Yeah,
um, again, to remind everybody where they can get it. I know some. Do you have a Facebook page, or I know I've seen it on the Grant County Historical Society Facebook page.
right. Colton puts it on there, but no, I don't have a Facebook page.
Okay.
Well,
Uh,
I do a personal
a
page.
person, yeah, yeah.
If anybody
So,
wanted to contact me, they could do it through there.
mhm,
But mainly, the best source of getting it is through Amazon.
mhm,
But there
yes.
are the Arnold Log House, which I mentioned, and the Sherman Tavern have them on sale.
Mhm. And we'll put a link in the description too, so people can uh, just click on that link and go right to purchasing it. Again, Miss Taylor, thank you for coming on and talking to us about it. The book is called "Voices That Echo from the Past: A Black History of Grant County." Um, Anything else before we go?
I don't think so. I thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And when that next book comes out, go ahead and uh, call us up, and we'll talk some more. Uh,
Okay.
maybe, hopefully, not in 15 years, though, right?
No, I don't think this one will take me 15 years.
All right. Well, good, good. Well, again, thank you for coming on, and thank you all for listening. And we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you. The viewers, the listeners, we want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.